No one expected Jeremy to show up that cloudy morning. Since his grandfather's funeral, he had vanished like smoke in the wind. The old farmhouse in rural Missouri was quiet, as if even it sensed something big was about to happen. Dry leaves danced on the porch, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee hung in the air. Jeremy entered without knocking, as if he already knew exactly what to do. The house was exactly the same. The worn Persian rug, the old portraits hanging crooked on the wall, and the safe. The safe. Hidden behind the office bookshelf, locked for over 4 decades. Aunt Linda always said it was just to scare children. But Grandpa Thomas always repeated, "This safe will only open when the time is right." No one ever understood what he meant by that. Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. Jeremy went straight to the safe. He didn't even look around. With a trembling hand, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. "Grandpa gave me this before he died," he said, his voice breaking. Aunt Linda frowned. She took the paper from him. It was a signed authorization. But something was off about the handwriting. She looked him straight in the eye. "That signature is fake." Silence fell like a heavy blanket over the room. Jeremy didn't blink. He just whispered, "Then prove me wrong." Before she could respond, he placed his palm on the safe's biometric scanner and positioned the paper on the reading screen. A beep. A click. A cold snap. The sound of the safe opening was like thunder in the dead of winter. Aunt Linda took 2 steps back, confused. Jeremy was breathing quickly, his eyes wide. The rest of the family approached, silent, as if something sacred was about to be revealed. The safe, until then a family enigma, creaked slowly until it revealed what lay within. No money. No jewelry. Just an old envelope, yellowed with age. Jeremy picked it up carefully, as if it were made of glass. "This is what he wanted me to see," he murmured. No one dared interrupt. Aunt Linda covered her mouth with her hand in shock. Jeremy opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, a single photograph. An unknown woman holding a newborn baby. Behind the photo, soft handwriting, "For the one who could never stay." The silence was broken only by the sound of the wind hitting the windows of the house. Aunt Linda paled. She recognized the necklace around the woman's neck. This woman, she worked with Dad in the 60s. Jeremy turned the photo over again, reading and rereading the sentence on the back. It didn't make sense. But at the same time, it made perfect sense. Inside the envelope was another piece of paper. A birth certificate. The child's name, Thomas Elijah Monroe Jr. born August 19, 1963. Mother, Eliza Carter. Father, Thomas Monroe. Jeremy's grandmother was not mentioned anywhere. Jeremy felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Did he have another child? He asked, as if his voice no longer belonged to him. Aunt Linda sat on the sofa without saying a word, her eyes brimming with tears. The grandfather she idolized was hiding a secret so deep it made her rethink her entire childhood. Uncle Ray entered the room at that moment. "What's going on here?" he asked, seeing the pale faces, the open safe, the scattered papers. Jeremy held up the certificate. "Our grandfather had a child. With another woman." Ray shook his head slowly. That's impossible." But the proof was there. Written. Dated, signed. The same signature that, minutes before, had been called a forgery, now appeared perfectly on the birth certificate. The first twist was complete. The safe had revealed more than a secret. It had unearthed an entire story. Jeremy rummaged through the bottom of the safe. He found something else. A smaller envelope, folded with military precision. "To whoever finds this, forgive me," the cover read. With sweaty hands, he opened it. It was a letter. Handwritten. In Grandpa Thomas's firm, clear handwriting. My son, if you've made it this far, you already know what I hid, the letter began. I chose silence because the pain was greater than the world could understand. Each line was a dagger to the soul of the reader. I loved this boy. But I was a coward. Jeremy stopped reading, choking. Aunt Linda took the letter and continued. I promised your grandmother I would never bring this pain into our home. And that I would never tell her about Eliza. Or Eli. Eli. The name no one knew, but which now echoed around the living room walls like an ancient whisper. Jeremy looked through the safe again. He found a small metal chest, locked with a combination. The date of birth, Linda suggested. He turned the dial. 1-9-33. A soft click. The chest opened. Inside, a pair of baby shoes. And a gold bracelet with the name recorded. That was the climax. The moment when the weight of truth fell upon everyone. Jeremy wept. Aunt Linda sobbed silently. Uncle Ray removed his cap and murmured something that sounded like a prayer. None of them knew how to react. Everything had changed. But there was more. Taped to the bottom of the metal box, a small note with an address in Denver. For Eli. In case we ever meet. Jeremy stared at the paper as if it glowed. A spark of hope ignited. Could he still be alive? Jeremy clutched the paper tightly. The address looked recent, typed into a computer. He could be alive. And he has no idea who we are. Linda placed her hand on her chest. My God. Does he know who his father is? The question hung in the air, heavy, unanswered. Uncle Ray looked at Jeremy. Are you going there? Jeremy didn't answer right away. His eyes were fixed on the little shoes inside the trunk. If I were in his shoes, I'd want to know. This wasn't just about a secret anymore. It was about a reunion that might still happen. In that moment, Jeremy was no longer the rebellious grandson. He had a mission. Something no adult in the house had dared to do for 40 years. His face hardened with a sense of purpose no one had ever seen before. And that was when Aunt Linda said something that would change everything again. I knew it. She whispered. Jeremy turned to her, confused. What do you mean? Linda took a deep breath. I was a teenager then. I heard Dad crying in the barn once. He was holding a teddy bear. When he saw me, he said it was just missing a war buddy. But I knew it was more. Everyone fell silent. This unexpected revelation showed that, deep down, the pieces had always been there. It's just that no one wanted to put them together. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Ray asked. Linda wiped away a tear. Because deep down, I was afraid of the truth. Jeremy stood up. He carefully put away the birth certificate, the shoes, and the bracelet. The photo remained on the table, a reminder of what had yet to be said. The Denver address seemed to burn in his hands. There was a whole world behind that door that opened with a click. The decision was made. But before leaving, Jeremy said, Does anyone want to go with me? Aunt Linda hesitated. But Ray answered first. This is our story too. I'm not going to let you do this alone. Jeremy nodded. Then let's go. But no one could have imagined what awaited them in Denver. Outside, the wind blew lighter. As if the house itself had let out an ancient sigh. Jeremy took one last look back before getting into the car. This place that had always held memories was now the starting point for something new. Something that would forever change who they were. On the road, no one spoke. Just the sound of tires on asphalt and a strange feeling of anticipation. When they stopped for gas, Jeremy took the photo out of his pocket. Do you think he looks like me? Linda asked. She stared at the image for several long seconds. There's something in his eyes. Yes. 4 hours later, they arrived at the address. It was a simple house with a wooden porch and an American flag out front. Jeremy got out of the car, his hands sweaty. What if he doesn't want to see us? he asked. Linda replied tenderly. Then you at least tried. That's what matters. Jeremy climbed the porch steps slowly. Each step felt like it weighed a ton. He took a deep breath and raised his hand to knock on the door. But before he could, it opened. A man in his 60s, with grey hair and light eyes, looked at him. Yes, he said calmly. Jeremy froze. He didn't know what to say. He just held out his hand with the photo. The man took it, looked at it, frowned. Where did you get this? Jeremy replied, his voice cracking. I think you're my uncle. The silence that followed was almost sacred, until the man took a step back. Come in. And it was there, on that threshold between the unknown and the inevitable, that the story truly began. The door closed behind them. Time, finally, was ready to speak. But what would come next? No one could have ever imagined. The sound of the door closing behind them seemed to seal a silent pact. Jeremy entered slowly, his eyes taking in every detail of the house. Framed photos on the walls, old baseball trophies, and a faint scent of wood and coffee. The man who greeted them still held the photo. Where did you get this? Jeremy took a deep breath. From my grandfather's safe. Thomas Monroe. The man froze. For a second, it felt like the name had knocked the ground out from under him. He stared at Jeremy, then at Linda. And you are? Jeremy hesitated, then said, family. Or at least, I think so. The man walked to the window. He was silent for several long seconds. The distant sound of a lawnmower filled the air. Then he turned, his eyes welling up. My name is Elijah Carter. But, when I was little, they called me Eli. Aunt Linda held her breath. Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. Eli sat in the armchair and looked at the photo again. That woman is my mother, Eliza Carter. She died 3 years ago. Jeremy and Linda exchanged glances. This hurt more than they could have imagined. She never told me who my father was, Eli said. She just said he was a good man, but that he chose another life. Jeremy pulled the birth certificate from his pocket. He handed it over carefully. Eli stared at it as if it were a stick of dynamite. He read it line by line, his lips trembling. Thomas Monroe, he whispered. My father was Thomas Monroe. The phrase sounded like something he'd wanted to say since he was a child, but never could. Did he know about me? Eli asked. Jeremy nodded slowly. He loved you, but he was afraid. And he hid everything. Linda took the letter from the safe and began to read it aloud. Eli listened as if absorbing every word with his heart. At the end, he simply said, he wasn't a monster. He was just afraid. Eli stood and walked to a wooden box in the corner of the room. My mother kept this. She said I could only open it if someone ever came, with answers. He unlocked the small trunk. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to Thomas Monroe. None of them had been sent. Linda covered her mouth in shock. She wrote to him her whole life. Eli nodded. Every week. For 20 years. But she never had the courage to send it. Jeremy picked up a letter and read it aloud. It was from 1972. Today our son turned 9. He asked if his father had ever seen snow. The words were like daggers. Eli, his eyes brimming with tears, sat back down. She said writing was the only way to remember. Jeremy didn't know what to say, so he simply handed him the slippers from the trunk. Eli took them with trembling hands. She told me about these shoes, he whispered. He bought them. Eli pulled out an envelope hidden deep within the box. There's something you might not know. He opened the paper and revealed a document. A marriage certificate. Thomas Monroe and Eliza Carter. Date: June 1963. 3 months before Eli's birth. Jeremy paled. They got married. Linda took a step back. But he was married to our mother. The shock was absolute. Eli sighed. My mother said they married in secret. He promised he'd come back, but something stopped him. That changed everything. Absolutely everything. Jeremy stood up, pacing in circles. So, our grandfather had 2 families, 2 lives. Eli finished. And 2 loves. It was hard to process. 1 faithful woman, 1 forgotten. 1 official family, 1 invisible. But both true. Jeremy felt his mind spinning. Eli continued. After my mother passed away, I started looking. I hired a genealogist. But I never found anything concrete. Jeremy replied, maybe because he covered all his tracks. Linda agreed. Dad was meticulous. He never did anything out of control. It was frightening how he managed to hide so much for so long. Eli got up and went to his room. He returned with a worn diary. This was my mother's. He opened it to the page marked with a red ribbon. Jeremy read the first line. Today is the birthday of the man I loved more than myself. And just below, if he had known about the illness, maybe he would have come back. Illness. Jeremy turned the page. The words leaped like fire into his eyes. I was told Thomas was dying. From cancer. Terminal. He wrote to me one last time, but I never had the courage to open it. Linda stopped. He knew he was going to die. Eli nodded. And so did she. Jeremy felt his throat close up. Eli opened a drawer and took out a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. This is the letter she never read. His last. Jeremy held up the envelope. Do you want to open it? Eli took a deep breath. No, you must. You came here. You brought the truth. I think she would choose you for this. Jeremy opened the envelope carefully, as if every inch contained a lifetime of pent-up emotions. The letter was handwritten, the handwriting tired but firm. Eliza, if you ever receive this letter, it will be because time has not allowed me to fulfill what I promised you. Jeremy paused. Everyone held their breath. I loved you. More than I should have. More than I could have. And I loved our son. But guilt suffocated me. I chose the wrong path. Not out of cowardice, but because I thought it was right. Linda turned her face away, crying silently. Eli listened as if hearing his father's voice for the first time. Tell Eli he was my greatest pride, even if in silence. And if one day he forgives me, I'll be at peace. Jeremy stopped reading. The silence that formed was almost sacred. The letter trembled in his hands. Eli reached out, picked it up, pressed it to his chest and said, I forgive you. It was as if a heavy cloud lifted from the room. Linda stood up and hugged Eli tightly. Jeremy stepped back, looking out the window. Outside, children rode their bikes. A woman watered the flowers. Life went on. But inside, everything had changed forever. Eli opened a cabinet and took out a photo album. My mother kept everything. But always in secret. They flipped through the pages together. Childhood photos, old notes, drawings with the word Dad scribbled. Eli pointed to one photo in particular. It said I had his smile. Jeremy couldn't hold back the tears. It was like looking at an older version of himself. You have his look too, Linda said, lightly touching Eli's shoulder. That moment sealed something invisible between them. They were no longer strangers. They were broken parts of the same story. But then, one last surprise. At the bottom of the album, hidden between the pages, was a key. Small, rusty, with a small piece of paper attached to it by a string. On it, handwritten, Cedarville, Tennessee, Locker 118. Jeremy read aloud. Cedarville? That's 8 hours away. Eli's eyes widened. My mother was born there. Curiosity flared again. Maybe there's more, Linda said. Jeremy could already feel the cycle opening again. Something had been left behind. Something Eliza wanted to protect until the end. One last piece. A closet that might hide the truth that not even Thomas had the courage to face. Eli pocketed the key. Let's go to Cedarville. Jeremy nodded. We have to finish what we started. Linda, her eyes steady, murmured, God doesn't leave anything hidden forever. And they all knew in their hearts that this journey was far from over. Because sometimes what was buried comes back to the surface with even greater force. The basement of the Monroe farmhouse had always been a place he avoided. It smelled of mold, damp wood, and memories no one wanted to disturb. But that afternoon, with the Cedarville key in hand, Jeremy felt he had to return. There was something unresolved. Something calling to him, almost like a voice from the past. Aunt Linda turned on the flashlight and followed him down. We've never explored this corner, she said, pointing to a worn brick wall. Jeremy ran his fingers along the surface until he felt something loose. A fake board. He pushed it away. Behind it, a small metal box, wrapped in weathered plastic. Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all His infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for He will never abandon us, for His love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. The box was heavy. Inside were dozens of envelopes, all dated between 1963 and 1982. They're letters, Jeremy said, his voice almost broken. But, they're not from Mom. Linda frowned. They're from Eliza, she added, recognizing the handwriting. Jeremy pulled out the first one. Dated September 15, 1963. Eliza wrote about sleepless nights, Eli's crying, and missing Thomas. You promised you'd come for Christmas, the letter read. Eli already smiles when he hears your name. Jeremy read aloud. Linda wept softly. Letter after letter revealed an intense, painful, passionate story. Eliza didn't just write with words. She wrote with her soul. There was hope in the first letters. Anger in the middle letters. Silence in the last letters. In one letter she wrote, I think I'll soon stop writing. Not for lack of love, but for too much of it. Linda sat on the cold basement floor. She never gave up on him, even when he gave up on her. Jeremy felt his stomach churn. And he kept them all, he said, looking at the untouched stack. He read them, but he never responded. It was as if Thomas wanted to keep their love alive, but at a distance. Among the letters was one with a red ribbon. It was different from the others. It was sealed. Jeremy hesitated. Linda encouraged. Open it. It was from Eliza, but it wasn't addressed to Thomas. It was addressed to whoever one day understands our love. The letter was a testament, a confession, and a confession. Thomas and I were married in secret, she wrote. He promised me he would come get me after his military service. But Thomas's father found out. He threatened to destroy his life, to sever his family ties. He chose to protect me, by abandoning me. Jeremy felt a lump in his throat. Eliza continued, I never blamed him. But the pain was so great that I could never love another man. Linda clutched the letter to her chest. My father, my God. It was as if a veil had been lifted before their eyes. Thomas's story wasn't that of a traitor. It was that of a man torn between two worlds. Jeremy found something else at the bottom of the box. A ring. Small, simple, with a pale blue stone. It's the wedding ring, he whispered. Inside was engraved, E&T, eternity, no matter what. Linda sobbed. He loved her to the end. And Mom. Did she know? Jeremy had no answer. Linda stood up quickly. "There's something you need to see," she said. They ran upstairs. She went to the couple's bedroom and pulled a wooden box from under the bed. Inside was a notebook. "Mommy's diary," she said. "I've never read it, but now I think it's time." Jeremy opened to the page marked by a dry petal. Grandma's handwriting was firm. "Today, Thomas cried in his sleep. He whispered the name Eliza. I pretended I didn't hear. Love isn't just flowers. Sometimes, it's enduring what you don't understand." Jeremy swallowed hard. She knew all along, and chose to forgive. Jeremy flipped through more pages of his grandmother's diary. Each passage revealed she carried a silent burden. To love is not to possess, but to protect. She'd written this after Christmas in 1974. The same year Thomas disappeared for 3 days and returned with red eyes. Now it made sense. Linda whispered. She wasn't blind. She was strong. Jeremy agreed. That woman who baked pies and told Bible stories at night was also the keeper of a secret that could have destroyed everything. And yet, she chose silence. Not out of fear, but out of love. They returned to the basement to put away the letters. But something caught their eye. In the corner of the wall, a loose board. Jeremy pulled it. Behind it, a hollow space with a laminated envelope. Inside, a hand-drawn map. At the top, written in childish handwriting, "Our secret place, Tennessee." It was the same address as the key Eli had discovered. Cedarville. Locker 118. A spot marked with an X on the map indicated an abandoned barn. Jeremy looked at Linda. "This isn't over," she replied. "It's just beginning. Because where there are traces of love, there are also buried truths." In the last letter in the box, Eliza writes, "If my son ever hears the whole story, let him know there was no abandonment. There was sacrifice. There was no forgetting. There was silence and longing." Jeremy closed the letter reverently. She never wanted revenge. She just wanted to be remembered. Linda hugged Jeremy. "You did what no one else dared." But Jeremy knew something was still missing. There was an absence throbbing like a toothache. The letter mentioned a last gift from Thomas hidden in the place where it all began. And that could only be discovered at the next destination. As the sun set behind the golden fields, Jeremy surveyed the farm as if for the last time. The house held secrets, yes. But it also held love. The kind of love that endures decades, mistakes, and bad choices, and still survives. On the way back to Denver, Jeremy called Eli. He told him everything. The letters. The ring. The diary. On the other end of the line, Eli wept. She died thinking no one would know. But now, she's being heard. Jeremy promised. We'll go all the way. For her. For him. For all of us. The following Sunday, they were all together in the car. Jeremy, Linda, and Eli, with the key to Cedarville in their pockets. 3 generations crossing the country to unearth not just memories, but an emotional legacy of incalculable value. And every mile they traveled brought them closer to something eternal. Linda brought her grandfather's Bible in her luggage. She thought it would be important. He read it every night. "Maybe God wants us to read it today too," she said. Jeremy smiled. "I think he's been talking to us. All along." Eli, in the back seat, held the baby bracelet with his name on it. But the Bible was heavier than they remembered. At the last stop of the day, Jeremy leafed through the pages. And between the Old and New Testaments, he noticed something strange. A small volume, wedged between 2 glued sheets. It was a secret cavity, precisely carved. Inside, a folded piece of paper and something that looked like an ancient medallion. The paper had only one sentence. "If you've made it this far, it's because you've forgiven." The medallion was engraved with the image of a dove and a cross. On the back, the inscription, "Trust in him at all times," Psalm 62 verse 8. Jeremy felt his heart race. This is more than symbolic, Linda said. Eli touched the medallion with his fingers. My father was a man of faith. Jeremy looked up at the sky. Maybe he left this as a sign that everything is being guided. The car drove on in silence. But now, there was something sacred between them. Something eternal. Because the next stop was Cedarville. They arrived in Cedarville on a gray afternoon, the sky heavy as if holding ancient secrets. The town was small, almost forgotten in time. 2 main streets, a Baptist church with a rusty bell, and a gas station that also sold apple pie. It was like stepping back in time. Eli clutched the key marked Locker 118. The map found in the basement indicated an abandoned barn at the back of an old farmstead. Jeremy parked the car next to a rickety wooden fence. This is it, he said softly. Linda made the sign of the cross. Whatever God wants. Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. The barn was covered in ivy and dead leaves. Jeremy pushed open the wooden door, which creaked like an ancient lament. Inside, the smell of hay and rust was still strong. At the back, a row of rusted metal cabinets. 911 was there. Locked, but waiting. The key turned easily. The cabinet opened, revealing a wooden box wrapped in a cloth embroidered with crosses. Jeremy carefully placed the box on the floor. There's something heavy inside, he said. Eli knelt and removed the cloth, revealing the symbol of a dove with a flame on its chest. Something sacred. Upon opening the box, they found an old Bible. Much older than the one Linda had brought. The pages were fragile, but the leather was sturdy. Inside, tucked into a recess between the chapters of Psalms and Proverbs, was a secret compartment. Something no one expected to find there. Inside the compartment was a cassette tape and a handwritten sheet of paper. If you're listening to this, then my soul has rested in peace, the note read. But perhaps yours still needs answers. Eli looked at Jeremy. He recorded something. Jeremy nodded. And he wanted us to hear it now. They found an old tape player at the local church, where the pastor welcomed them kindly. If this tape came from his Bible, maybe it contains something God wanted to keep until now, the pastor said. As they inserted the tape, a hoarse, tired voice began to speak. It was Thomas Monroe. My name is Thomas. And if my family is hearing this, then it's time they knew the whole truth. His voice was heavy, but still strong. For years, I lived in 2 worlds. I was a husband, a father, and also a repentant man. But I never stopped praying for you. I never stopped loving you. Thomas continued. The Bible you hold in your hands belonged to my mother. She taught me that God forgives, but also expects us to confess. I couldn't tell you in my lifetime, but I left clues. Because I knew that one day you would have courage where I failed. Jeremy clenched his fists. Eli wept silently. Linda held a wet handkerchief in her hands. The tape continued. Don't judge Eliza. Or your grandmother. They were both victims of my cowardice. But they both taught me what unconditional love is. A love that kneels, even when hurt. The voice paused. And then Thomas revealed something no one expected. There was a third person. The air in the room grew heavy. Her name was Rachel. I met her at the hospital in 1978. She gave me another child. Eli's eyes widened. Jeremy froze. Thomas said, I never got to see him grow up. She moved to Ohio. But I left her the same cross and dove medallion. If you ever find him, he's one of you. The pastor turned off the tape. An abysmal silence fell over the church. No one could speak. A new brother? Jeremy stood up slowly. He had 3 children, Eli replied, and none of them knew about the other. Linda, tears in her eyes, said, "He spent his life trying to pick up the pieces, even breaking more in the process." The pastor prayed with them. Forgiveness doesn't change the past, but it changes the weight we carry from it. Inside the Bible's cover was another surprise. A sealed envelope addressed to Rachel, should she ever return. Inside was a photo of her holding a baby. And in the background, the Veterans Hospital in St. Louis. Jeremy turned the photo over. It was dated September 1979. The photo was captioned, "To my boy, may God always protect you." Eli held the photo as if it were his own. "Another brother," he murmured. "My God, so many untold stories." Jeremy already knew. The search for answers wasn't over. She was just entering her deepest chapter. Jeremy felt a tightness in his chest. That tape, those words, were changing everything. He wanted to be remembered, not as a traitor, but as a man who tried. Linda nodded. He failed, but he didn't run away until the end. Eli knelt at the church altar. He said a silent prayer, his eyes closed. In the front pew, the pastor opened the Bible. "What you experienced is in the scriptures. David also loved too much, made too many mistakes, and was forgiven anyway." Jeremy looked at the medallion around his neck. The cross and the dove now had a new meaning. It was more than symbolic. It was redemption. Outside the church, the sky was beginning to lighten. As if forgiveness, little by little, was washing away the clouds of the past. Jeremy looked at Eli. "We'll find him. The other brother. We have to close this circle." Eli nodded. "But how?" Linda replied firmly. "We'll follow what your father left, step by step." On the church pew, among the ancient hymns and wooden benches, lay one final clue. A folded bulletin from 1980. In the corner, scrawled by hand, was an address: Street Lewis, Medical Records Department, North Wing. Jeremy held it like a sacred map. Their faith had been shaken. But something stronger was growing there. The belief that, even in mistakes, God writes straight with crooked lines. Thomas's Bible was now a spiritual journal. A confessional with hidden messages, symbols left by a man who didn't want to be forgotten, only understood. On the way back, the car was silent. But it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of hope. The road ahead was long, but now, they were no longer alone. Thomas's words still echoed, "If you've made it this far, it's because you've forgiven." Eli took Rachel's photo from his pocket. "Do you think she's alive?" Jeremy replied, "I don't know. But her son is. And he carries half of all this too." Linda smiled for the first time that day. Maybe he's waiting. Like Eli waited. And everyone knew. It was time to find him. When they arrived at the hotel, they placed all the items on the bed. The photos, the letters, the Bible, the locket, the map, and the ribbon. A shrine of memories. And, in the center, the paper with the St. Louis address. Jeremy took it. "Tomorrow, we'll find out what else Grandpa didn't have the courage to tell us." Because a man's heart can hide 1,000 secrets. But it never escapes time. The drive to St. Louis seemed longer than the GPS indicated. Every mile held unanswered questions, silences that hurt more than words. Jeremy drove in silence, while Eli stared at Rachel's photo in the window's reflection. Linda leafed through Eliza's letters, as if searching for something that had slipped away. They arrived at the Veterans Hospital shortly before 3 in the afternoon. The old building smelled of disinfectant and nostalgia. At the information desk, Jeremy showed the photo. She was here in 1979. Her name was Rachel. The attendant typed silently, her expression neutral. "Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all His infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for He will never abandon us, for His love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you." The attendant frowned. There's a file, but it's marked as restricted. Maybe a family member could request access. Jeremy replied without thinking. I am. The woman hesitated, but called a supervisor. After a few minutes, they returned with an envelope. This is everything we have in the system. And they handed it over, carefully. Inside the envelope were 2 documents and a black and white photo. Rachel was smiling with the baby in her arms. But it wasn't the same woman from the first photo. Linda took a closer look. My God, that's not the Rachel from the tape. Eli picked up the photo. But it's the same child. That's when they realized Rachel was Eliza. Jeremy froze. Eliza used another name? Eli shook his head. It doesn't make sense. She was Eliza Carter. Linda pulled the journal out of her backpack. She began rereading old passages. And there it was. I started using Rachel as a protective name because of the threat. What threat? Jeremy pulled out the second document. A police report from 1978. Patient's name: Rachel Carter. Accused of running away with a newborn, alleging persecution by an influential man connected to the military. She ran away from someone, Jeremy said. But not Thomas. Eli read with a frown. Threat to life, protective conduct, confidential transfer. Rachel, or rather Eliza, had disappeared from public view with legal assistance. Everything was recorded. She was protecting her son, Linda said. From whom? From what? The answer came with the third piece of paper. A statement signed by Eliza in 1979. I received anonymous calls, threats, and attempts to coerce me into handing over my son. The name cited as the source of the threat: Walter Monroe, Thomas's father. The same man who, according to Eliza, promised to destroy her life. Eli slumped down on the reception bench. Our father's father tried to erase us from existence. Jeremy narrowed his eyes. That's why she disappeared. Changed her name. Lived in anonymity. And Thomas. Maybe I never knew her whereabouts afterward. Linda wept. They were victims of an invisible war. At the bottom of the folder was a final handwritten note. Should anything happen to me, give this to Thomas Monroe. But the note was never sent. It just sat there. Stuck. Forgotten. Time had stolen the chance for reconciliation. Jeremy held the paper. But now, it's being heard. At the bottom of the folder, a yellowed business card caught Eli's eye. It was from a nursing home in Jefferson City. Handwritten on the back, Rachel Carter, Quarto 12. Eli looked up slowly. She was alive. Until recently. Jeremy picked up his phone. The institution still existed. There, they confirmed it. Rachel had passed away 3 years ago, at almost 80. She didn't receive visitors, but she talked a lot about a guy named Thomas, said the receptionist. Eli asked if there were any belongings stored. Actually, there's a box with your name on it, she said. The 3 of them looked at each other in silence. The box was filled with small objects: a pocket Bible, an old rosary, a hair ribbon, and a letter. Addressed to my son, if he finds me one day. Eli sat on the porch of the institution, the box on his lap. May I read it aloud? Jeremy and Linda nodded. My son, if you're reading this, it's because God allowed you to return to me, even if only in spirit. You were my greatest gift. And my greatest mission. I ran away not out of fear, but out of faith that seeing you grow up free would be more important than my own name. Eli wept, his fingers clutching the paper. The letter continued. If I ever see Thomas, tell him I forgive him, that the pain turned into prayer, and that our love, despite everything, was worth it. Jeremy held back tears. Linda cried without saying anything. The letter ended with a simple sentence: Heaven will fix what earth couldn't. There, on the silent porch, the 3 felt the presence of something greater. Eliza, Rachel, mother, wife, martyr. She had been much more than a secret. She had been love in the form of silence, faith in the form of escape, hope in the form of a letter. And now, finally, she was remembered. On the way back, Linda said, she wasn't the other woman. She was the woman who loved courageously. Eli replied, and who loved God to the end. Jeremy looked out the window. The world was the same outside, but inside them, everything was different. Lighter. Deeper. At the hotel, they arranged everything chronologically. Eliza's life was now a whole book. And amidst it all, something was bothering them. What about the other son? Linda asked. Did she give him up for adoption? Eli replied, or is he still out there unaware? Last envelope. At the bottom of the box was a birth certificate. No father's name. Just Rachel Carter and Daniel. Jeremy pointed to the hospital's surname, Wexler Recovery Center. We have a name, Eli added, and we have a mission. Linda held up the card. If God has brought us this far, he will continue to show us the way. Before falling asleep, Eli stared at his mother's photo. She did the impossible for me. Now it's my turn. Jeremy responded tenderly. You have a beautiful story to tell. And maybe a brother ready to listen. The light went out. But the flame of truth was only just beginning to burn. Because sometimes, the woman the world tried to erase is the one God made a point of immortalizing. The morning sky was gray, as if it knew the weight of the coming hours. Jeremy woke with a feeling of foreboding. Something that didn't come from the letters, or the photos, but from the silence between the unread pages. Eli was still asleep. Linda was making coffee while leafing through Eliza's diary for the 100th time. At the bottom of the diary was an envelope taped shut. Jeremy stumbled across it as he ran his fingers along the spine. Inside was a short note. If you get this far, look for the man at the bank. He has what Thomas left hidden. No signature. Just one word at the bottom. Memphis. Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. They hit the road again. 3 hours to Memphis. It was like following the trails of a map drawn by fate. Jeremy drove. Eli read every note from Thomas as if it were gold. He didn't want us to find this, he murmured. Or maybe he did, but only when we were ready. They arrived at a small old bank branch with blue stained glass windows and bronze plaques. Jeremy went straight to the counter. My grandfather left something here. His name was Thomas Monroe. The manager asked for a moment. She left and returned with a metal safe. He left this on the condition that it would only be opened if someone came with this key. It was the key to the locket. Eli took it from around his neck, his hands trembling. The manager smiled in surprise. He knew someone would come. The safe was opened right there, in the private room. Inside was a signed will, dated 1985, and a property map. The will said, should my death occur without the truth having been revealed, may this inheritance go to whoever has the courage to hear it. Eli clutched the document to his chest. Jeremy read it aloud. Thomas had left an estate in the name of an unknown heir. In the recipient field it read, E.M. E.M. could be Elijah Monroe, Linda said. Eli replied, or Edward Monroe. A name we don't know yet. Jeremy remembered the tape. Thomas mentioned an unknown son. What if it's the other son? The third. Silence fell heavily in the room. The map read, Oak Hollow, Tennessee. It was a property of over 100 acres. A vast tract of land, abandoned since 1990. On the back a note. The truth is in the land. My land. Jeremy narrowed his eyes. This is taking us deeper and deeper, Eli replied, and closer to the source. They arrived at Oak Hollow the next day. The property was vast, surrounded by dense vegetation. The main house was covered in moss, its windows broken but still standing. In the center of the lot was a small shed with a rusty padlock. Eli broke the lock with a crowbar. Inside were boxes of documents, old photos, and a folder marked Inheritance. Upon opening it, Jeremy found something that stopped him in his tracks. A deed of gift. Thomas had transferred the property to a specific name in 1989, Rachel Carter. Eli sat on the floor, breathless. He never forgot her, Linda said. Even after everything, Jeremy added. He tried to make amends. The folder also contained monthly deposit receipts. Thomas had been sending money anonymously to Rachel's account from 1982 to 1994. Eli wept. She never told me. She never bragged. She only said that God always took care of us. At the bottom of the folder was yet another surprise. A letter, never sent, to Eliza. The world hurt you because of me. But this land is yours. Because the love you gave me was priceless. Linda stood slowly. This land, it's not just an inheritance. It's a buried apology. Jeremy nodded. And a chance for a new beginning. Eli walked to the center of the property. The wind blew through the trees. She always wanted to plant something, he said. Now I understand why. They found a stake in the ground, marked with a faded red ribbon. Beneath it, a small metal box was buried. Eli dug with his hands. Inside were seeds wrapped in cloth and a note, for when love can blossom in peace. Linda brought her hands to her face. Oh my God! The seeds were intact. A rare type of flower Eliza mentioned in her diary. She dreamed of a garden where no one would lie, Eli said, his eyes welling up. Jeremy whispered, maybe we should plant them. And let this patch of earth speak what it couldn't. They decided to restore the house, transforming the property into a memorial of truth, faith, and reconciliation. Jeremy wrote in his notebook, where there was pain, there will be flowers. Where there was silence, stories will be born. Eli agreed. It's not about land. It's about healing. But something still bothered them. The will mentioned 3 heirs. And so far, only 2 had been found. The original envelope bore a watermark. When Jeremy held it up to the light, a word appeared. Daniel. Eli froze. It was the name on the birth certificate found at the nursing home. Daniel. Eliza's lost son. The invisible heir. The brother who might not even know he was part of this story. We need to find him, Eli said. This inheritance is his too. Jeremy nodded. And maybe he's the final piece of this puzzle. On the horizon, the sunset tinted the property with golden hues. Linda looked up at the sky. Do you feel it? Jeremy replied. Peace. Eli added. But also a calling. And they all knew they couldn't stop there. Because some inheritances are not made of earth. They are made of truth. After planting the first seeds in the soil of Oak Hollow, Jeremy felt something was still missing. There were more questions than answers. The will cited a legacy of wounded honor. And those words echoed in his mind like an ancient whisper. It was time to return to the farm where it all began. They arrived at Thomas's house in the early evening. It was untouched, as if time had frozen, waiting for them. Let's go up to the attic, Linda said. Mom always said he kept things there he didn't want anyone to see. Jeremy went up first, the stairs creaking like a warning. Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. The attic was filled with dust and wooden boxes. But there was a different chest in the corner, with a rusty lock and the name W. Monroe carved on the side. W. Walter, Linda said quietly. Thomas's father. The one who tried to erase Eliza from history. Jeremy broke the lock with a tool. Inside the trunk, a forgotten world. Old documents, yellowed letters, a leather ribbon with war medals, and a military diary. Eli opened one of the letters. It was from 1943. Walter wrote to his wife. The baby was born. It's not mine. Everyone looked at each other, perplexed. What? On paper, he continued. She swore it was mine. But the boy has Sergeant Caldwell's eyes. I can't look at him. Jeremy sat on the floor. He thought Thomas wasn't his son? Linda was silent. Her hands were shaking. Eli said, if that's true, Thomas grew up being rejected. They leafed through more letters. Walter described a growing coldness. I taught the boy to be tough. I don't give affection. That will make him strong. It was a portrait of broken parenthood. Linda wept. Mommy always said Daddy never knew what love was. Now, I understand why. At the bottom of the trunk, they found a hidden photo frame. Inside was a picture of a young woman in military uniform and a smiling man. Behind the picture, Mildred and Jack, October 1941. Mildred was Thomas's grandmother, Linda said. Jeremy asked. Jack wasn't Walter. And everyone understood. Thomas may have been the product of a forbidden love, and Walter knew it. He raised Thomas, but with anger. And that anger was passed down like an inheritance, Eli said. Linda nodded. That's why Thomas never felt enough. He inherited the guilt of a lie that wasn't even his. They found Walter's journal. The last pages were handwritten devotionals. God punishes the children of sinners. And I was his instrument. Jeremy stood. That's distortion. That's not faith. That's misinterpreted pain. Eli replied, and that's how one generation hurt the next. Linda leafed through Walter's diary with trembling hands. He used the Bible as a sword, not a shield, she said. He cited verses to justify abandonment, not love. Jeremy murmured, how many men have done this? How many children have grown up under faith without mercy? Eli found one last letter at the bottom of the trunk. It was addressed to Thomas, but never sent. You were never my blood, but you were my cross, the first line read. Linda covered her mouth in shock. My God! Jeremy closed his eyes. That explains everything. The letter ended with a devastating sentence. Maybe I've hardened you. But the world is made for hard men. Eli let out a long sigh. Now I understand why Thomas didn't know how to show love. He inherited the silence. He inherited the punishment. Jeremy sat on the attic floor beside the trunk. His sin didn't begin with him. It was passed down as a curse. Linda knelt. But it can end here. Now. Because we chose to break this cycle. We chose the truth. And the truth sets us free. In the corner of the attic sat a small children's trunk filled with old toys. Among them was an illustrated Bible with the name Thomas scrawled on it by hand. Inside, a page marked Psalm 27 verse 10. Even though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will take me up. Jeremy whispered. He knew. He always knew. Eli held the verse like someone holding a hug. We're breaking ancient curses, Jeremy. Things no one has had the courage to face. Linda replied, and it all started with a safe and a forged signature. They smiled through their tears. But they knew there was still one missing piece. In the last box in the attic, there was an envelope addressed to an unknown name, Sergeant Harold Boone. An old war buddy of Thomas's. Maybe he knows what Thomas never told you, Jeremy said. Eli nodded. We need to find him. The envelope bore an address, Ohio. As they descended from the attic, a new silence accompanied them. It was no longer the weight of the past. It was the call of the future. The Spirit of God seemed to whisper something invisible. "The story isn't over yet," Linda said. "It's unfolding. And we're ready to listen." Jeremy laid everything out on the living room table. The photos, the letters, the diary. "We're not going to hide any of this. Ever again." Eli replied, "We'll keep it, but not to hide. We'll keep it to teach. Because the stories that hurt are also the ones that heal." And it was at that moment that they decided to do something unthinkable. A museum. Within one's own home. A space where future generations could learn the truth. "Not about scandals," Linda said, "but about choices." Eli added, "About redemption. About faith. About what happens when you decide to stop repeating what hurt you." The house was being reorganized, each room a chapter in the story. Jeremy created a mural with photos of Thomas, Eliza, Rachel, and even Walter. In the center, a cross made from scrap wood from the attic. And there, they promised, "We will never again let silence win. Because there are sins that are repeated, until someone has the courage to forgive." The envelope found in the attic bore a name that no one knew. Sergeant Harold Boone. Eli looked up the address. It was a military nursing home in Ohio. Jeremy called and was told that Boone was still alive, 93 years old, and lucid. "He mentioned Thomas Monroe before," the nurse said. 2 days later, they stood at the entrance to the veterans' home. The place smelled of mothballs and dried leaves. But the atmosphere was serene. In room 204, a tall, thin man with a steady gaze was waiting for them. "Are you Thomas's family?" he asked, as if he had known this moment was coming. "Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you." Jeremy nodded. Eli showed him the picture of the medallion. Boone held it gently. "He gave this to me before the last mission. He said it was a symbol of his faith and the redemption he sought." Linda asked, "Did you know about Eliza? About Rachel?" Boone looked out the window. "I knew much more. In 1963, we were sent on an unofficial mission to foreign soil. Thomas saw something he shouldn't have." Eli frowned. "What do you mean?" Boone took a deep breath. "An experiment. An attack. Ordered by superiors. Thomas tried to stop it. He was threatened with dishonorable termination." Boone continued. "He came home broken. Not just physically, but spiritually. He started writing letters. He tried to report it. But no one would listen." Jeremy asked, "And what does that have to do with Eliza?" Boone was silent. Then he replied, "She was a nurse at the base. And she saw everything. Eliza helped Thomas hide documents. They wanted to run away together. But his father, Walter, found out. He had connections. He turned them both in. Eliza was fired, with false records. Thomas was threatened with arrest if he opened his mouth." Jeremy was in shock. "So, their separation wasn't a choice." Boone confirmed. "It was extortion. It was fear." Linda wept. They were silenced, with authority, with shame, with manipulation. Boone handed over an envelope. "Thomas asked me to keep this. He said that one day, his family would understand what truly destroyed his life." Inside the envelope were black and white photos, confidential documents with government seals, and a letter signed by Thomas. "If this country is free, it's because we paid dearly for it. But my soul has never been freed. This is my confession." Eli closed his eyes. "My father was a hero, and he carried the weight alone." Boone handed over one last letter, addressed to Daniel. Thomas knew he wouldn't see his youngest grow up. He asked that if you ever found him, please give him this. Eli clutched the envelope to his chest. We still haven't found him. But now, we need him more than ever. Boone looked at Jeremy. You forged a signature, didn't you? Jeremy nodded, embarrassed. Boone smiled. It was the wrong move. That unleashed the whole truth. Linda added, God writes straight, even when we draw crookedly. And everyone knew then. The story was finally being revealed. Outside the veteran's home, the wind blew steadily. Eli held Thomas's letter like a child. Jeremy looked up at the sky. We were taught that he betrayed, that he made mistakes. But the truth is, he tried to save lives. And he paid with his own. Linda nodded silently. He was never weak. He was silenced. On the way back, the car was silent. But it was a silence filled with respect, honor, and a kind of peace that comes only when the truth is exposed. Jeremy said, his story doesn't fit in a paragraph. Or a will. It fits in a struggle. In a faith that never died. At the hotel, they opened all the documents again. The photos from the military base. Eliza's letters. The will. And now, the secret papers Boone had kept for over 60 years. This needs to be made public, Eli said. Jeremy replied, but first, we need to finish finding him. Daniel. Thomas's last child. The unknown brother. The missing link to complete this story. On the back of one of the letters was a note. Birth, 1980. Mother's name, Rachel. Child's name, Daniel Carter Monroe. Jeremy searched every record he could find. One name emerged. Daniel Ray Carter. He lives in Arkansas, Jeremy said. He works with lumber, he's 45. He's never married. And, apparently, he lost his mother 3 years ago. Eli took a deep breath. He doesn't know, Linda added. But he will. And he'll have a choice. The same one Thomas never had. With all the papers in hand, the three of them hit the road again. This time, guided not just by clues, but by conviction. Every mile brought them closer not only to Daniel, but to the closure that only the truth can bring. We started with a safe, Jeremy said. Now we're opening hearts. Eli smiled, holding the envelope addressed to Daniel. I hope he's ready, Linda replied. And if he's not, we'll wait. Because that's what Eliza did. Love waits. The sun set slowly on the horizon, tinging everything gold. And God there between them seemed to whisper, now go. Because there are truths that can only be revealed when time and love finally meet. Daniel's house was simple, made of light wood, smelling of sawdust and silent. Jeremy stopped the car in front, his heart pounding in his throat. Eli held the envelope containing his father's letter. Do you want me to talk? He asked. Jeremy replied, I think it has to be you. He's your brother. Daniel opened the door with a suspicious expression. He had the same eyes as Thomas. He looked at Eli, then at Jeremy and Linda. Can I help you? Eli pulled out the photo of his mother. That woman was my mother too. Daniel froze. He carefully picked up the photo. Who are you? Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. They explained everything. The letters. The tapes. The will. Daniel listened in silence, his face expressionless. When Eli finished, he handed him the envelope with his name handwritten on it. Daniel opened it slowly. He read Thomas's letter in its entirety. Then he said, so, he loved me, even though he didn't know me? Daniel pulled a necklace with an old medallion from his pocket. It was just like Eli's. Mom gave it to me when I was a child. She said it belonged to my father. That he would protect me with it. Linda wept. Jeremy was silent. That object united two men who had never met, but who had always been connected. They sat in the living room. Daniel asked for time. "I don't know how to process this." Jeremy suggested a DNA test. Not out of distrust, but for closure. Daniel agreed. "I need to know who I am." They went together to the nearest clinic. They collected the material right there, side by side. Days later, the email arrived. Jeremy opened it first. He was silent for several long seconds. Eli picked up his phone. He read it. Then he looked at Daniel, speechless. Linda held her breath. Jeremy finally said, "Daniel, you are not Thomas's son." The room fell silent. Daniel's eyes widened. "What?" Eli read again. "Zero compatibility. No blood relation." Linda sat up slowly. "But the locket, the letter." Jeremy already had the answer in his hand. Rachel knew her real father abandoned her while pregnant. She made up a story to make you feel loved. Daniel stood, his eyes filling with tears. "So, I'm not even that." Eli walked over to him. "You're our brother. Maybe not by blood, but by pain, by history, by faith." Daniel began to cry. "She lied to me." Linda replied, "She protected you, like Eliza protected Eli. Love sometimes lies. To save." Jeremy took the envelope containing Thomas's documents. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't. But he chose to love. Even when he was in doubt. Daniel sat down again. Silent. Destroyed. And rebuilt at the same time. "My whole life has been an attempt to understand why I felt so lost." Eli held his hand. "Now you're not alone anymore." Daniel squeezed tightly. "Even so, it hurts," Jeremy added, "but now, the pain has a name. And there are those who carry it with you." In that moment, three men cried for the first time. Together. Brothers not by birth, but by choice. Linda made tea for the three of them as the sun fell through the window. "The truth doesn't always bring comfort, but it does bring freedom," she said. Daniel stared into space. "I'm not Monroe. But, for some reason, history brought me here." Eli replied, "And maybe you'll be the one to close this circle." In the middle of the table sat the three medallions. Jeremy lined them up side by side. "You know what I see here? 3 different paths, brought together by time and faith." Daniel looked at Eli. "You could hate me." Eli smiled tenderly. "But God didn't teach me that. He taught me to embrace." The next morning, they drove to the Oak Hollow estate. Daniel stepped onto that soil for the first time. "I feel something here," he said. "As if I've been here before. Even though I've never been here." Jeremy replied, "Maybe it's not the place. Maybe it's the calling." Eli handed him one of Eliza's seeds. "Plant this," he said. "Not for blood, but for honor." Daniel dug into the earth with his hands. Linda recited a verse. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Jeremy added, "And those who were rejected will be accepted." The ground received that seed as if it had been waiting. Daniel handed Jeremy an envelope. "I found this among Mom's belongings. But I never understood." Inside, a letter. From Thomas. Written 2 years before his death. "To the son who may not be mine, but whom my heart never stops loving." Linda sobbed. Eli closed his eyes. Jeremy read to the end. Thomas knew. Always. But he chose to love. Even with doubts. Even with fear. Because true love doesn't require proof. It just delivers. Daniel hugged them both. "I don't have the name Monroe, but I have the spirit. And that, no one can take away from me." And in that embrace, everyone knew. DNA can explain a lot, but it will never define what the heart chose to experience. The sky was clear that Sunday. The breeze was gentle. The leaves swayed as if to say, "Yes, now." Jeremy walked calmly across the grounds of Oak Hollow. Something inside him knew the moment had come. And it wasn't about a ceremony. It was about saying goodbye properly. Eli walked alongside, Thomas's Bible in his hands. Daniel carried the letter his father never delivered. Linda held a small vase with the first flowers planted from Eliza's seeds. "Today isn't a funeral," she said. "It's a handover." Jeremy added, "An acknowledgement." "Before I continue, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all his infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, for we can never lose faith in God, for he will never abandon us, for his love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you." In the center of the property, they built a small altar using wood from the old house. Above it, a plaque with 3 names: Thomas Monroe, Eliza Carter, Rachel Carter. Below the sentence, "Where silence ends, healing begins." Jeremy looked at his brothers. "Are we ready?" Eli began reading Psalm 23 aloud. Linda knelt, placing the flower on the altar. Daniel took the medallion from his pocket and hung it next to the plaque. The wind blew hard at that moment. Jeremy looked up at the sky. "God, if they can hear us, may they feel now what they have never felt in life, peace." Linda pulled an envelope from her pocket. "I almost threw this away. But something stopped me." It was a letter written by Thomas, addressed to my wife, in case the truth ever comes out. Linda read with a broken voice. "Thank you for loving me even when my heart was torn." The letter said, "You knew. I know you knew. And yet, you stayed. You went home." It was forgiveness in the form of presence. Jeremy wiped away a tear. "Our grandmother was stronger than we thought." Eli said, "She didn't lose. She won, silently." Daniel added, "And she taught us to love without possession." Beside the altar stood an ancient tree. Eli remembered Eliza writing about it in her letters. It was their favorite spot, he said. Jeremy dug at the foot of the tree. He found a small wooden box, buried inside. Inside, a wedding ring. And a note, "Our love will blossom in the next generation." Linda fell to her knees. They loved each other. Despite everything. They chose to keep it, not destroy it. Daniel placed the ring on the altar. "What time separated? Faith joined." Jeremy replied, "We're not burying a story. We're planting it." And everyone felt they were right. The sun began to set behind the hills. Golden light illuminated the altar, as if the sky itself were paying homage. Jeremy held Eliza's diary. "You read the last page. We may not be remembered. But if someone loves us better because of our story, then it was worth it." Eli placed Thomas's Bible on the altar. He sought forgiveness until the end. And now, we give it to him. Daniel lit a candle and placed it beside the wooden cross. "May this light never go out." Linda concluded with a prayer. "Lord, thank you for transforming pain into redemption, and silence into salvation." As they were about to leave, they heard footsteps. A man in a hat and coat was walking slowly along the trail. Jeremy approached. "Can I help you?" The man took off his hat. "My name is Andrew Boone. I'm Sergeant Harold's son. I found something that belonged to your grandfather. He asked me to deliver it." Andrew handed over a sealed letter bearing the army symbol. Inside was a request to reopen a cold case. Thomas Monroe exposed wrongdoing and saved lives. The army posthumously recognizes his courage. Jeremy read it aloud. Everyone was moved. The truth, at last, was acknowledged. He died afraid of being forgotten. But now, he is remembered with honor, Eli said. Andrew smiled. "And it was your faith that brought this to light." Jeremy looked at his brothers. This story is ours. But it belongs to so many people. Linda added, because love sets us free. They placed the letter of recognition under the Bible, along with the flowers, the ring, the medallion. There were no more lies. Only love. Painful, human, imperfect, but true. And as they walked away, Jeremy said something that would make sense to everyone. Now, yes. He can rest. And so do we all. Because there are funerals that do not mark the end, but the beginning of true life. Now that you've heard this story, tell me honestly, how many truths has your family hidden in silence? How many gestures of love were held back by fear, pride, or time? How many people left without hearing an "I forgive you" or "I understand"? What if today, you went to that person who has been carrying pain in their eyes for years and said, "Let's finish what we started"? Could you do it? Would you have the courage to break a cycle that has hurt generations, just with an act of faith? This story is not just about Thomas, Eliza, or Daniel. It's about all of us. About what we failed to say. About postponed forgiveness. About stories that hurt, but need to be told. Because only when we have the courage to look back with love, can we move forward with freedom. So I ask you with affection, what is still locked in your heart, waiting to be revealed? Which of your family's stories still needs a different ending? If this journey touched your heart, like this video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. But not for me. Do it for yourself, so continue listening to stories that remind you of the power of truth, faith, and the love that spans generations. And now tell me, have you ever felt something similar? What would you do if you found a letter like that? I'm here to listen to you.